The beep of the cashier's scanner stopped. Then silence. The old man's hands shook as he slid his card again. Declined. The cashier's polite smile froze, and the line behind us sighed. I could have looked away. I almost did. But the way he clutched that loaf of bread, like it was all he had left, made something in me ache. Put it on mine, I said. My voice was small but steady. He turned startled and his eyes, pale blue tired, searched my face. Ma'am, he murmured. You don't have to. It's fine, I said. Minutes later outside he pressed a small, folded slip of paper into my palm. Not money. Just a number. And a look that said my life was about to change. Joanne didn't feel like a hero. When I walked into my apartment that night, the weight of the day still clung to me. My hands smelled faintly of onions from my shift at the diner. The kids, Eli 9 and Sophie 6, were sprawled on the couch under a thin blanket, watching a rerun of some cartoon. I kissed their foreheads, forcing a smile. Mac and cheese okay for dinner? Always, Eli said without looking away from the screen. Sophie just nodded, hugging her stuffed rabbit. The hum of the old fridge filled the small kitchen. Paint peeled near the sink. A damp patch bloomed in the corner ceiling. Rent was due in 6 days. I'd been running numbers in my head all week, trying to see if I could pay it without letting the lights get cut off. That's why paying for that old man's groceries earlier had been reckless. $27.48. But the look on his face, a mix of pride and shame, had stuck with me. I pulled the slip of paper from my pocket. A number. 10 digits. No name. I set it on the counter and got back to boiling pasta. The next day at the diner, I told Marcy, my coworker, about it. You're too soft, she said, slapping a plate of pancakes onto the pass. Old folks like that, you never know. Could be a scam. Maybe, I said. Didn't feel like it. She smirked. You thinking of calling him? What, you want your $27 back? I didn't answer. The truth was, I wasn't sure why I was thinking about it at all. 3 days later, I called. The voice on the other end was deep, steady. Arthur Bell. This is Joanne. We met at the grocery store. A pause. Then, the young woman who wouldn't let an old fool go hungry. I'm not. I just wanted to. I stumbled, embarrassed. I wasn't expecting anything. Good, he said. Because I'm not offering charity. I'm offering work. That's how it began. The first time I saw Arthur in person after that call, it was behind a metal warehouse in the industrial part of town. The air smelled of oil and rain. Semi-trucks rumbled past, splashing water onto the cracked pavement. Arthur was smaller than I remembered, wiry, wearing a flat cap and a heavy brown coat. But his handshake was firm. I need someone who's not afraid of work, he said, leading me through the warehouse door. This place belonged to my brother. He's gone now. I'm trying to fulfill one last order before I close it for good. Inside, the smell hit me, wood dust and a faint tang of rust. Stacks of crates towered like walls. A forklift beeped in the distance. I can't pay much, he said. Not yet. But if we make this shipment on time, the client's check will cover us both. I almost said no. My feet ached from the diner shift that morning, and my kids needed me home. But the thought of another month scraping by, always one bill behind. I nodded. I'll do it. We worked late. At first, I just swept floors, labeled boxes, and sorted invoices. Arthur was exacting. No shortcuts, no sloppiness. But he never raised his voice. Over the weeks, I learned his way of doing things. The man could remember a supplier's address from 30 years ago, but forgot where he left his coffee mug. One night, while we were sealing a shipment, Arthur told me about his brother, a craftsman who built custom wooden furniture for luxury hotels. Their last contract had fallen through after the brother's death, and Arthur had been drowning in debt, trying to honor the old commitments. I don't like owing people, he said, almost to himself. Neither did I. That spring, disaster hit. The trucking company we hired pulled out 2 days before the delivery, citing logistical conflicts. Arthur's usual contacts refused to step in unless we paid double. I tried to reason with them, but one dispatcher laughed. Lady, if you can't pay, you can't play. Something in me cracked. For years, I'd been on the wrong side of other people's policies. Landlords, utility companies, banks, always bending me until I nearly broke. This was different. This was ours. I called in every favor I could think of, old diner customers who own vans, a friend of Marcy's with a pickup, even my neighbor's college-age son. We made the delivery on time. Barely. When the client's payment cleared, Arthur handed me an envelope. Inside was more money than I'd seen at once in years. "This isn't charity," he said. "It's a share." That night, I paid the rent early and bought real groceries, not just the cheapest pasta, but fresh fruit, good cheese, and even chocolate milk for the kids. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe the tide was turning. But not everyone was happy about it. 2 weeks later, I came home to find my sister, Lena, waiting in the hallway. We hadn't been close in years. She leaned against the wall, her coat draped over her arm. "Mom says you're working some side job," she said. "Something shady in a warehouse." "It's not shady," I replied. "It's honest work." She smirked. "Honest work doesn't pay that much unless something's off." Her words stuck with me like burrs. That was Lena, always sure she knew better, always assuming if I got ahead, it couldn't be clean. She left that night without hugging the kids. 3 months later, Arthur called me into his office. His desk was littered with order forms, coffee stains, and a stack of letters. "We've got a new opportunity," he said. "Bigger than anything we've done. But I can't run it. My health's not what it used to be." He coughed, waved it off, and slid a folder toward me. "You'll take the lead. If you can pull this off, the business will be yours." I froze. Me? Running a business? I'd barely kept my own life together. But I took the folder home. That night, I spread the papers across the kitchen table while the kids slept. The contract was enormous. 3 hotels, custom orders, deadlines stacked like dominoes. The payment? Enough to start over for real. The next week was a blur. Meeting suppliers, negotiating prices, arranging deliveries. I barely saw the kids, leaving meals in the fridge with sticky notes. "Back late. Love you." It wasn't until the second week that I realized something was wrong. One of the suppliers, a key one, stopped answering my calls. When I finally reached someone, they told me they'd been advised to cut ties with us. "By who?" I asked. They hesitated. "Someone claiming to be your business partner. Said you're not legitimate." My stomach dropped. I only had one guess. I drove to my mother's house the next morning. Lena's car was in the driveway. Inside, they were having coffee like nothing was wrong. "Why would you tell people I'm not legitimate?" I demanded. Lena raised an eyebrow. "Because you're not. You're a waitress pretending to be a business owner." "Because I work hard." I shot back. "Because I got an opportunity you didn't?" Her mouth tightened. "You're going to crash and burn, Joanne. Better now than later." I left shaking, with rage, with hurt, with the sharp, cold certainty that she'd tried to destroy the one good thing I'd built. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain tapped against the windows, steady as a clock. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Lena had said. Better now than later. She'd wanted me to fail. Not because she needed the business. Lena had her own job, her own life, but because she couldn't stand me succeeding where she'd written me off. The more I thought about it, the more the hurt sharpened into something harder. I'd been swallowing things like this my whole life. My father's sighs when I couldn't pay him back. My mother's quiet disapproval when I had Eli at 22. The way Lena, 3 years older, was always the responsible one, while I was the mess. But here's the truth. I was tired of swallowing. At 3:14 a.m., I sat up, turned on the lamp, and opened Arthur's folder again. If Lena thought she could scare off suppliers with a few whispers, she'd underestimated me. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school and drove straight to the warehouse. Arthur was already there, sipping tea. "You look like you've been through a storm," he said. "I have," I replied. "And I'm not letting it sink us." I told him everything. He didn't interrupt, just listened, nodding slowly. "Then you fight," he said simply. "Not with your fists. With facts. With delivery dates. With proof." That was the turning point. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to win. Step 1. Rebuild the supplier list. I drove from one side of the county to the other, shaking hands, explaining the project face to face. Some doors closed in my face. Others opened just enough for me to slide a foot in. I learned to speak their language. Not grand promises, but numbers, timelines, and guarantees. Step 2, paperwork. I dug through every invoice, every payment record, every signed contract Arthur still had. I built a binder so thick it barely fit in my bag. This was my shield. Step 3, timing. I staggered orders so even if one supplier dropped out, we could keep moving. But it wasn't smooth. 2 weeks in, a truck broke down on the interstate, delaying a critical delivery. I stood on the shoulder in the rain, watching the driver kick the tires. My phone was full of missed calls from the kids' school. Sophie had a fever. In that moment, I wanted to quit. Go home, wrap my daughter in a blanket, and forget the whole thing. But quitting wouldn't feed us next month. Quitting wouldn't prove Lena wrong. I called Marcy from the diner. Can you pick up Sophie and stay with her until I'm back? She didn't hesitate. Go finish your job, Joe. 3 days later, the hotel manager called to confirm the first delivery had arrived, early. It was the first crack in the wall Lena had built. The final delivery was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in mid-June. I was there in the hotel's grand lobby, watching as the last crate was wheeled in. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching on the polished wood furniture, our furniture. The manager shook my hand. Everything's perfect. Payment will be wired by Friday. I smiled, but inside, I was already thinking about my next move. On Friday, payment hit the account. And that night, at my mother's house, I made sure Lena heard the truth. We were sitting in the kitchen, Mom at the table, Lena leaning against the counter. I placed a folder on the table and opened it to the top page. The hotel's thank you letter, complete with photographs of the installed furniture. That's the project you said I'd never finish, I said. Paid in full. And by the way, every supplier you tried to scare off, they're now on my permanent list. Lena's eyes narrowed. You think this makes you better than me? No, I said quietly. It makes me someone you can't push down anymore. I slid a check across the table, a portion of my earnings. For Mom's roof. Because even if you tried to ruin me, I'm not like you. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was mine. Summer rolled in slow and warm. I kept the warehouse running, now under my name. Arthur came in less and less, his health keeping him home. But when he did, he'd walk the floor like a captain inspecting his ship. You've done more with this place in 6 months than I did in 6 years, he told me one afternoon. Don't stop now. At home, things felt different. Not richer, we still had bills, still had long days, but steadier. The fridge was full. The kids had new shoes before the old ones split. And there was something in me that had shifted. I didn't flinch when the phone rang, afraid it was another bill collector. I didn't feel like I was standing on a trapdoor anymore. One Saturday, I took Eli and Sophie to the farmer's market. We passed the grocery store where I'd met Arthur all those months ago. I stopped for a moment, looking through the glass at the checkout lanes. It was strange. That one small choice, to pay for someone's bread, had rewritten my whole life. People talk about turning points like they're loud. Car crashes, job offers, grand gestures. But mine was quiet. Just me, a stranger, and $27 I couldn't really spare. Arthur once told me that most people wait for life to hand them the right opportunity, but opportunities are rarely wrapped neatly. More often, they look like hard work, long nights, and the risk of looking foolish. He was right. If I'd walked past him that day, I'd still be at the diner, still counting quarters for rent, still explaining to my kids why we couldn't afford more. Instead, I learned that sometimes, the only way to win isn't to crush your enemies, it's to outlast them. To show up, keep working, and make their predictions worthless. Lena still doesn't call much. That's fine. I don't need her approval anymore. My life speaks for itself. Last week, I found that old slip of paper in the back of my wallet, the one with Arthur's number. The ink was faded, the paper soft from being folded and unfolded so many times. I smiled and put it back. Some debts can't be measured in dollars. And some victories don't need to be shouted. They're just lived, every single day.